Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Well, yeah, that's 15 minutes. Yeah, okay. Um, well, I'll be speaking on marine terminals. They actually exist at the fag end of the pipeline or at the beginning of the pipeline. And both of these places are critical positions for any pipeline operator. And so far as the oil industry is concerned, they come within the preview of the pipeline divisions of the various E&P companies, as well as refineries and marketing companies. Well, most of the presentation in these slides is gathered from my 5 years tenure in ONGC Videsh, in which we do international operations. I was looking after Russia and Sudan. Well, there were two extremes. Russia, we had temperatures of minus 140. We were drilling and producing from Sakhalin Island. The nearest port was Dekastri, from where we could carry our produce home or our product home. And the Tatar Strait from Dekastri right till we reach out of the strait is around 700 nautical miles, and 6 months down the year it would be frozen with ice. So you have to use ice-class tankers and icebreakers moving in the front to make way. The SBM in Dekastri also works under very critical conditions, and that's also frozen in ice. Well, I'm not talking much about Dekastri because ONGC was not the operating partner. ExxonMobil was the operating partner. But at the initial stages only, our stake was over $2 billion US. And as usual, we had been able to get our produce back after 5 years. It was not possible to market, to carry the crude home, so we had to sell it just outside around to Japan and Korea, which eventually are good markets. Well, now this slide is from Sudan, Port Sudan, where the marine terminal exists. This morning, the managing director of Indraprastha Gas Limited was mentioning about pipeline surveillance. We started from pipeline walkers right up to helicopters. Well, in Sudan, you also need a camel because you can't walk in the desert, and helicopters were not to be seen in that area because of various conditions. When you're operating in an international environment, one has to be very careful of what is there locally. It's not that you're operating at home and you can buy what you want. You're not operating alone. You're operating with a couple of partners. There may be 3, 4. Each one has his own priorities. So accordingly, you have to mold yourself as per the environment. So far as Sudan is concerned, we were 4 operating partners. That was a joint operating organization. It was called GNPOC, Greater Nile Petroleum Operating Company. And the 30% partner, the major partner was CNPC China. So the president of the company was Chinese. We had the Indian share of 25%. We had the Malaysian share, and the balance was with the government of Sudan. All 4 were national oil companies and were answerable to their public on how they spend their money. Well, the presentation consists of mainly 3 aspects because I felt that instead of trying to focus on one, I will cover the complete offshore part of the marine terminal so as to give a flavor to the participants here on what are the key elements in an offshore terminal, and one can have a view of everything. Basically, I am dealing with the biggest tool while operating in offshore terminals, that is the support vessel. Without that, you can do nothing, because you have to have the environment safe, take care of any calamities, as well as take care of the subsea pipeline, take care of the SBM on the surface. A typical supply boat or a multi-purpose support vessel is the basic tool you have, because in offshore you need a vessel. You can't do anything without one. The SBM is the focal point. Without SBM, things can go wrong with either a refinery, marketing company, or even an E&P company. I can recall that 4 or 5 years back, there was a problem with the product SBMs of Reliance due to harsh weather conditions. Something went wrong with the SBMs. So they had to curtail the production from the Jamnagar refinery, which is the largest showpiece for them, just because they didn't have an SBM. Typically, like someone was saying in the afternoon about the pig problem in other places, most of the refineries in India are water fed because we don't produce enough crude oil on land. So we have to either import it or take it from Bombay High, and the entry is always through a marine terminal. So if the marine terminal SBM is not there, or it's very vulnerable to weather conditions, if something is wrong, it's off operations, then obviously you will have a dry-out condition in the refineries. There will be not enough crude. Either you have to reduce the throughput or think of something else. And if there's a product selling terminal like the Reliance problem, then you have a tank top condition. Your refinery has produced product, but there's no way of evacuating it. So with all this in mind, I think I'll spend some time on the SBM aspect, because it's critical to all pipeline operators. So on and so forth, there will be a lot of accidents offshore. It's basically because the vessels which we use, or the Volvo which I use, are controlled by captains or handlers. But they're human beings, and a lot of investigations were carried out into various accidents in India as well as overseas, and by lead agencies such as the U.S. Coast Guard, because as everyone knows, that a lot of offshore accidents have taken place in the American area as well as in Europe. So they all come down to the human factor, that, well, if there's a human being handling an operation, he could make a mistake, he could be tired, he could make a wrong decision, and decisions will vary from person to person. One captain may do very well, other captain with the same qualifications may not do so well. So anyway, this picture of a beautiful bird, and this is just to show that even after operations, the environment was so beautifully maintained that you can see a happy bird sitting and enjoying the waves. Sudan Marine Terminal is on an area which is covered with what you call corals, and they're very good diving location. There are a lot of birds, pelicans and all that. So the environment has been thoroughly maintained. There were no incidences for the 5 years I was operating there. Now, basically, a typical marine terminal would, consist of about 8 positions. They are brought out here. Firstly, you have a tank farm. In Sudan, we had 10 into 400,000 barrels tank farm. After that, we have a pumping and metering station. Metering station is critical because from there you get the revenue. Whatever hard work you have been doing, unless it's transformed into money, the company chairman and board of directors are not happy with you. Then we have the subsea pipeline section, which goes up to subsea pipeline, that's from the beach valve to the plem. So the beach valve is located on the beach, and from there the subsea section begins. It goes to the plem, which is the pipeline and manifold. And then after that, from the plem, we have flexible hoses moving upwards to the SBM. We have the SBM as such, then we have the floating hoses, and then the floating hoses are connected to the export tanker. This is a picture of the tank farm in Sudan. No trees, nothing. It's just oil, and everything is oil. Well, this is the supply boat, which is the focus in the first chapter. Now, it has got duties to perform. Firstly, it has to give a mooring assistance, because there will be a 300,000 tanker coming in, and it has to be very safely put near the SBM, because if it runs on the SBM also could have a problem. So the boat ensures that there is no accident. It picks up the floating hoses, gives it to the tanker, and in case there are maintenance issues like repairing of the hoses, changing of the hoses, the workboat does all that. The other duties which are strategically important or standby important, there could be a fire on the tanker. So you have got those 2 guns. They're basically turrets used for firefighting, and with that you have got huge pumps working in the sea which will sort of take care of any fire. In case the tanker is burning, then you have to tow it out so that you don't spoil the SBM or the part of the terminal. And supposing there is a pollution, the only tool you have with this boat is equipped with anti-pollution chemicals, and there is a sort of a method by which you can contain the spill, you can pick up the spill, pump it on the board, and dispose it off in a suitable location. Other than that, on the surface, hoses, SBMs, they all require maintenance. You can use this board to take your maintenance staff there and get the things repaired and rectified and keep it always under operational conditions. The other most critical thing is surface work any boat can do, and marine terminal has a lot of subsea components. It has got a pipeline, it has got a plem, it has got hoses which are between the surface and the ocean bed, and it requires a lot of diving skills. What you see in the picture is not very clear, but it's the hand of a diver showing a defect in the subsea portion of the SBM. So you could either have a dynamically positioned vessel, but in those days, particularly in Sudan, where we are very prone to sort of partition of the country, terrorist activities, so the partners decided not to spend too much money. So we had a simple boat which we converted for diving support vessel, which the further pictures would be gone. And with a single boat, we could do all the operations, subsea, on surface, and safety duties by using only a single boat. Well, this is a basic boat which is there. It has got a jet constructed at the aft which pulls out the hoses for maintenance. It has got a diving chamber put on the intermediate deck that is white in color in the picture. It was not there originally, but the complete diving module is put on. You can put it on board, you can take it off whenever you need it. Basically, this was the boat which was hired and which was available locally. You can't specify and buy a new one. You have to take on charter hire because specifying construction takes its own time, and that sort of a time is not available for an overseas operator. So we generally hire one and then we modify it. So this is the picture which shows the mezzanine deck which did not exist. It has been put into place, and the diving module would come on the top. You need a lot of water to flush the pipelines when you are changing the hoses, which could be about 5 kilometers long, floating hoses. So for that, the firefighting pump of the tug, it's used to pump in the water so that the pipeline is flushed and the crude oil is pushed back to a dedicated tank in the refinery, to the terminal, and then you can take care of your repair and maintenance work. Well, when you are splitting the hoses, there's every chances of pollution while splitting the flanges. So there is a tank on the deck. There's a cover showing with the arrowhead. You remove the cover, and any spillage which is there is directed into that tank, which is later on taken ashore and pumped out. This is the fabrication process. Once we took the boat, we got it converted in the marine terminal only. There was a small port behind us, and we did all the operations at a turnkey time, easy supervision, and we could handle everything. Now finally, this is how it is. From the stern end of the boat, the hose is picked up and let out from the middle. Generally, they have got these gun gates. Traditionally, the name is there because during warships, these gates were used to put a cannon and fire at the enemy ship. So the hose comes from the back and goes on the side. So you have got a working area, and this is a unique concept which was used by the operating partners of Greater Nile, and there's hardly any expense to do this operation. Okay, so that's that about the support vessel, which is the key thing. Now we come to the SBM. SBMs has been in India for a long time. I remember since Bombay has started, we had an SBM there in 1984, and then other companies took up. Most of the refineries in India, they told you, are water fed. If you go to a port, the draft restrictions are there, the problem with the pilots, with the tug masters. So most of the refining companies, they prefer to use their own SBM so that they're outside the control of the port, which is an institution of its own and can exercise a lot of control on your operations. So this is a turntable buoy, which was typically very popular used in ONGC in the early days. And during my tenure as a marine advisor with the Oil Coordination Committee, I used to go to all the public sector oil companies, and in some of them, they still had the turntable buoy, which today is as good as obsolete because for various reasons it's totally open. If somebody wants to repair anything or just connect it, though, he's just exposed to the environment. And this buoy is floating. It will not be static as it is. It will be rolling and pitching, maybe 1 meter, 2 meter. Anybody who has to go there has to jump. So this is it. Now we have the picture of the turret buoy. This is what we have today, and which this presentation will cover. It is used by ADNOC. ADNOC has got a subsidiary called Abu Dhabi Marine Operating Company and Offshore Operating Company. The same buoy was used in Sudan. It's a turret type. Basically, a turntable is like a turntable of a gramophone, and the turret is like a turret of a tank, of a bottle tank. So it's completely enclosed. So all the repair work, the equipment is within a house. So you enter that, and then even if the environment outside is bad, it's raining, you are quite safe to operate. There are a lot of area on the top. You can need a lot of solar cells, to keep the thing operating because there's no power supply to it. It basically goes on the solar cells, and it is sort of enclosed and much more comfortable to work with. The picture shows you how it is put into position by a number of anchors. There are 6 in this case. There's a plem, and from the plem we have got these flexible hoses going right up to the SBM. So basically, this was of Abu Dhabi. It's a terminal of ADNOC. The name of the island is Das Island, which is a leading marine terminal in the Middle East. And a lot of exports of condensate and crude oil from ADNOC go through this terminal. Basically, there are 2 SBMs there in use. One is Tanker Berth 3 and other is Tanker Buoy 6. The original one, this is basically a joint presentation by Oil Companies International Marine Forum, in which I was a member during my tenure in ONGC Videsh. So basically, this gives how ADMA and OPCO operate. They have got these 2 terminals, which I have just mentioned. And Das Island is known to everyone who has to do something with oil exports. Well, the new SBM T6 was a replacement, and it was prolonged for some time till the TB3, which was to be repaired or replaced. As per the original design, it has to be done every 7 years. But then there was a case study which brought out whether we should go in for a repair every 7 years or we just take away this buoy and bring a new blue water. And all of us perhaps have been talking about corrosion. The 7 years maintenance predominantly for corrosion because it's a steel structure and lying in the worst sort of pollutant, the biggest enemy for steel, that is seawater. But to mention about the corrosion resistance and the coatings, blue water buoys last for 25 years. You don't even have to paint them. So to do, whether to change or not, they commissioned a study, and the commission was in favor of replacing the buoy in its midlife. They said remove the turntable midlife, go in for a new turret type buoy. So what did they gain? There was a cost saving. Though the capital cost, they had to spend money for a new one, but operating costs were very less. In 25 years, you didn't have to do anything on them. And moreover, so in the export and import business, you cannot have a stoppage. It has to continuously run for 25 days. In ONGC, we used to face the problem. When a buoy went to Cochin for dry docking or for repairs, 10 days we didn't know what to do. Fortunately, we had alternate buoys, and we could sort of move things through Butcher Island and Mumbai. So things were not bad, but in Sudan things could be bad because there was only one buoy. If the buoy didn't work, the country's exports were zero. If the exports were zero, there was no revenue, and if there was no revenue, they couldn't do anything without money. So there's no business interruption. Safe operations and maintenance personnel. As I showed in the previous slide, it's enclosed, so all the maintenance personnel are within the enclosure. They are not exposed to the wave, wind, saltwater sprays, and things like that. Again, the minimal lifetime spares. Spares are critical because if you are operating internationally, say we used to operate in Iran and we used to operate in Sudan. They were under sanctions from the US. So if you needed a spare, you could keep waiting till the cows came home and you would not get the spares because it was under sanctions. So the lesser spares, the lesser vulnerability to sanction. Another area where the sanction problem came is one of our seismic vessel. It was refitted, the first seismic vessel in Singapore. Now the seismic vessel had to pick up seismic signals with a hydrophone. Now as luck would have it, it was to be supplied by a Norwegian company, but then they had a license from the US Navy because the same hydrophone was used to detect submarines. And to get the approval from the US Navy, that took us 6 months. So after having spent so much money on the refit, repairs, ship could not function, it could not move out of Singapore harbor. So there are issues of the big brother also, so far as you're operating sanctions, so you have to be careful of them, and everything has to be taken into account. Well, if you have 2 similar buoys, that's an advantage because the spares are common, everything is common. Telemetry systems are easier to take care of, and the solar panels, as I just said, you've got wider area to use them, low maintenance. Single umbilical can be used for hydraulic as well as electric control of the subsea valves which are on the plem. So you have a redundancy and you don't have 2 umbilicals. So this is finally when the new SPM was put in position. The picture gives you in a view how the plumb is, how the pipeline has come, how the SPM looks, how the hoses are floated out, and it's a pictorial view which would be easy to understand for someone who has not been around in a marine terminal. See, offshore you have to be careful of weather, so you have to choose a good window when you want to do anything. And you see, I'll come to one point. In the pipeline division in offshore in ONGC, we had a problem. One hand lays the pipeline, and the other hand pulls out the pipeline, because pipeline being barges are anchor controlled. So if you have an existing pipeline and you drop anchor and the barge is moving to lay the second pipeline, it invariably pulls out the pipeline, which is there. Very recently, I was on a one-year contract with CEIL to do the diversification plan. So we had an instance where CEIL was an inspection agency, and we realized that while laying one pipeline, the other pipeline was getting uprooted. So for that thing, basically you should avoid using anchor-operated positioning system barges. Jackup is a good solution. Other than that, there is a dynamically positioned technology, which I'll come with. See, all the valves and all these things, subsea, you can't take a chance. So you have to check every equipment which you want to replace, see whether it'll fit in position. It's not that diver goes down and he comes up again and says the flanges are not matching. And it's better to replace the complete plumb, because it's going to be down for 25 years rather than try to save some money and keep it. Reducers, instead of going in for flexible ones, you can go in for steel ones. De-oiling technology, it could be done by the boat or by the terminal. Now we come to the conclusion. The buoy was successfully established and commissioned, and it's hopeful that for 25 years there will be no sort of headaches for the operator, for the pipeline operator, and things would come. So there were a lot of problems which I involved. One is the dewatering. A lot of water had to be taken. We used the tanker to do it. Old PEM replacement, fixation of umbilical to sea hoses, brackets, the old one were used. Blue Water was the principal contractor, so they helped in this thing. The jackup was used, as I just said, to prevent anchor destroying the existing pipelines, because in Darsa Island it's a cluster of pipelines, and you just can't damage it. Integrity issues, these were checked by the company, because you have to have the pipeline, the chains, the pipeline, and all these things have to be inspected for integrity, which was done by the ADNOC subsidiaries in this area, and they found that it was perfect, and the facility could be handled. Bad weather windows, jackups, I think I'll be going back into it. Well, this is finally how it is, a beautiful view of the SBM looking from the tanker and the chain being hooked onto it. The biggest problem in offshore vessels now, because I started off with ONGC in 1984. That time most of the supply boats and helicopters, they were owned by foreign operators. So India had nothing of its own. So they started jacking up the charter hire rates. They were run up by charter hire rates. What cost, say 100 rupees today was tomorrow offered for 200 rupees. So that time, under the leadership of Colonel Wahi and Dr. Malhotra, who was our director of operations at CEIL, so we said nothing doing, we just have the money, let's buy the boats. So 40 boats were bought with Indian flag in a matter of 2 years. 30 owned by ONGC, but 10 others owned by the contractors. That time there was one Ulstein design which was popular, which we used. That was the technology of that day, but then the problem with that was it depended on human skills. So nowadays you have a technology called dynamic position, where the vessel's exact position can be made by its own thrusters. It has got both thrusters, it has got thrusters in the aft, it has got propellers, 2 of them, it has got rudders, and they have computers on board which control the exact position. To know how you have displaced from the position, there are transponders which you can put on the seabed. You can use a taut wire system, or you can use satellite signals, or you can use GPS. With this, you can have an accurate positioning. This is how the DP vessel looks like. There are 2 forces acting on any floating object. One is the force of the wind, and other is the forces of the sea. In the sea, you have got the waves, swell, current, and thrusters of any other vessels nearby. On the top, you have got the wind. So all these forces are known, fed to the computer. The computer feeds the information to the sort of thrusters, and they bring the vessel back in not exactly to the same position, but with a limit of excursion. That please. Excursion limit is.
Please conclude, sir.
So yes, I think we are at the end of it. And then based on the high accuracy of DP systems and taking care of the human factor which causes accident, we recommend for offshore purposes DP is an good option for safe operation. Thank you, gentlemen, for having me. I hope I'm not taken
No, no,
somebody
no.
at this time.
Fine, fine, sir.
Thank you.